It's time to join Montana's very own and your voice for agriculture, Talkin' Ag Lane Nordlund, for today's Lanecast.
Well, cattle producers from across the Big Sky State gathered in Butte, America for the 2025 Montana Stockgrowers Midyear Meeting, and a lot of speakers coming in talking about the state of the cattle industry, and one of those was Kim Brackett, Vice President of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Idaho rancher, and welcome to Butte, America, Kim. What's your first impression here of coming to the richest hill on earth?
You know what, I was really excited to be invited to come to Montana. It's such a beautiful state and such a beautiful drive. Actually, as I was driving up last night, I called my husband and said, why don't we spend more time in Montana? It is beautiful up here.
Well, speaking of your husband, you ranch in southern Idaho, right on the border there with Nevada. How are things shaping up here this spring as we move into summer? Are you getting a little bit of moisture? What's the sentiment down there?
You know, we're doing pretty good. It's all in perspective. We only get 10 to 12 inches a year anyhow, so this year it's coming at the right time. So we've got green grass, fields are greening up, it's green on the desert, cows are doing good, so cautiously optimistic.
Well, we know these cattle prices are good, and we're watching these cattle on feed reports very closely, and summer sale season coming upon us here very soon on the videos. But producers are watching a lot of things, and as we sit down today, New World Screwworm. We agree that's a mouthful to say, but that has been an issue that we've been watching for several months. We saw last year imports halted at the border of cattle, horses, sheep, but then reopen. Well, then we saw that screwworm continue to make its way north. And now we have a pause at the border of live imports. And we had a lot of false news out this week that plummeted our market. From NCBA's perspective, can you give us an update on the New World Screwworm, why it's a threat to the U.S. cattle industry, and some of the steps that NCBA is taking, working with Congress and USDA and all the entities to keep the U.S. cattle herd healthy?
Absolutely. It is an emerging threat. The screwworm is considered a foreign animal disease, and as of today, it's 700 miles south of our border. So USDA is very involved in trying to eradicate the screwworm. You know, we had it in the U.S. in the mid-20th century, but we were able to eradicate it in the 1960s. So Secretary Rollins did close the border to protect the U.S. cattle herd, and at the same time, she announced a couple days ago, $21 million to help Mexico retrofit a fruit fly facility. So that would give us 2 sterile male fly facilities up and running. And that's the only way to truly eradicate the screwworm, is releasing these sterile male flies. So very supportive of the Secretary, and at the same time recognizing this is impacting our cattle markets. So we're sharing a lot of information, economic information, with the Secretary's office of what this has already done and what the compounding effect of this is going to be as the border remains closed. We're hoping in 30 days when she reevaluates that she'll be able to feel confident to reopen it.
Now, when we look at how that screwworm got 700 miles away from the U.S.-Mexico border, how did a lapse there in Mexico and Central America, how did that occur in monitoring and the release of sterile flies down there? How did we get to the point where we're only 700 miles away from the border?
So the screwworm actually broke through the border. Let's remember that it's endemic in Central and South America. They've been able to hold it at basically the Panama Canal, at that isthmus, for the past 60 years. It broke through last November and started moving its way north. And the reason we've got a problem now, that Panamanian facility can only produce 100 million male sterile flies a week, which is sufficient for that narrow landmass. But as it continues to move northward, we're now at quadruple the landmass. We're needing quadruple the number of flies and just not able to meet that demand. So hopefully get that other Mexican facility up and running. And I know the Secretary is also looking at getting a domestic here in the United States sterile fly facility up and running as well.
Now, we saw the false report on a website publication out of Missouri this week that falsely reported that New World Screwworm was in the United States. And the market reaction on the futures board was swift, and that market went into the red. It's finally up today. It recovered. It did not recover yesterday. But how important is it to have USDA and state agencies be the ones releasing this information and ensuring that the public understands that this is very concerning to the industry, but having the correct information is a top priority?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. I know USDA reached out to that news entity immediately and asked them to retract it, but of course the damage was already done at that point. One of the things we're doing at NCBA is helping producers understand what screwworm infestations look like, also how to report those. What's the correct entity to report that to, so we can support our state and federal agencies in being the lead news source when it comes to screwworm.
Now, when we look at that too, New World Screwworm is an issue. We eradicated it, but we look at other foreign animal diseases. Foot and mouth comes to mind. I was just in Australia for the World Angus Forum. That's a big discussion there. They do not have FMD, but the surrounding regions do have FMD. They don't want it there. It would shut down billions of dollars in activity, and that would happen here in the United States as well. So really, screwworm could be a drop in the bucket, and we saw what it did to the markets for a 2.5 day period. How important is it to stay vigilant on foreign animal diseases and make sure that there's research and funding? What is NCBA doing on that front?
Absolutely. Foreign animal disease is always top of mind for us. I think most recently, it's interesting to note that in the reconciliation package, one of the Farm Bill provisions that's included in the House version of that bill includes funding for that three-legged stool. So we continue funding the NADPREP, the National Animal Disease Preparedness Response Program, the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, and our FMD vaccine bank. So that might not get the sexy press that other pieces of that bill do, but that part is absolutely critical, keeping that up and running.
Now, you mentioned the reconciliation bill. I had a great conversation with NCBA's Kim Backus explaining the livestock cattle industry's perspective on those components in the House prepared bill. When we're looking at that, obviously there's risk management tools for livestock producers included, but there's also tax provisions extending those 2017 tax incentives or policy, let's call it. And where are we at with that? And how important is it to have tax reform or taxes in place that benefit family operations?
Oh, absolutely important. Actually, if you look at NCBA's vision and mission, it's all about creating a favorable business environment for producers to ensure profitability. So the tax policy absolutely supports that. We were really pleased with the House version of the reconciliation bill and the tax provisions that were included in it, as far as increasing exemption on the death tax, indexing that for inflation, making it a permanent exemption. We will continue to work for full repeal of the death tax, but at this point, that one's really important. There was multiple different tax provisions, Section 199, the 179 equipment expensing. It also extended relief on the federal tax disaster relief, allowing producers who receive compensation from a federally declared disaster, they would not have to pay taxes on that compensation. So maybe really detailed pieces, but critically important for profitability for our producers.
Now, obviously, there's a bit of confusion out there because the term Farm Bill kept getting brought up during this reconciliation. A lot of producers unsure, are we passing a Farm Bill? And obviously, we are still in an extension of the 2018 Farm Bill. Where is the progress on getting a Farm Bill passed as soon as possible that represents the interest of livestock producers in the countryside? And could there be one this year out in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think it's important to recognize we are almost in June of 2025. The House has spent 6 months getting their reconciliation bill across their finish line. We're now looking at the Senate and how much time that may take. So it feels like a really unlikely chance of getting a farm bill finished in 2025. However, in that reconciliation bill that the House passed, there are several farm bill provisions included in that, the ones that are tied to the federal budget. So we're pleased to see parts of that moving forward, but we're still focusing on maybe next year getting a full farm bill package across the finish line.
Well, again, you're here. You'll be speaking to the attendees at this year's midyear meeting of the Montana Stockgrowers. What's a message you want them to go home with from your position as a cow-calf producer and a leader with NCBA?
Well, I'm hoping that after I speak with them, they understand how hard NCBA is working for all of our producers on their behalf, especially in our DC office, and especially in the federal policy arena. My family back home is branding today, so it's nice that we get to go home and do the fun things we love to do, all the while knowing NCBA is working to improve the favorable business environment for us as producers.
Well, Kim, thanks for joining us and sitting down here today, and enjoy Butte, America.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lane.
Well, again, friends, a great conversation with Kim Brackett, Vice President of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, a cow-calf producer from southern Idaho. For more of our conversations that we've had during the Montana Stockgrowers Midyear Meeting, make sure and follow along all of our Western Ag Network social media channels, radio, TV, and, of course, the Lanecast Ag Podcast. I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lanecast with Talkin' Ag, Lane Nordlund. For more on Lane, check out his Facebook page, Lane Nordlund Ag Broadcaster, and NordlundCommunications.com.